Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our final session of the day for our 2021 Lancashire Innovation Festival. And as you know, we've been talking through and around health. And for our final session, which I have to say I've been looking forward to all day, we have three of our academics from Lancashire. So we have Professor Rob Young from Lancaster University. We have Professor Marcello Trevatti from Edge Hill University, and we have our own Subrayal from the University of Central Lancashire. And what they're going to do this afternoon is they're going to share some of their research with us. Each will give us a presentation on some of the really interesting and fantastic research that's being done across our three universities in Lancashire. So what I would like to do is invite each one by one to come up and give us a sneak preview of some of the activities that they're undertaking. So could I ask Professor Rob Young to come forward and share with us some of your exciting research?
Thank you.
If you'd just like to introduce yourself, who you are and what you do, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So yes, my name's Rob Young. I am the director of the Quantum Technology Centre at Lancaster University, and I'm also the co-founder of Quantum Base, which is an SME that's based at Lancaster University. And I've given my presentation here a rather modest title, How Quantum Technology Will Change the World. Because it's actually something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I think quantum technologies could play as a significant role in the future of our civilization as digital technologies do today. And hopefully I'll give you a little bit of a flavour for what I think quantum technologies are going to deliver in the next 9 minutes or so. So bear with me. So first of all, let me start by giving you a little bit of an introduction as to what quantum technology is and what it means. I'll try and demystify things a little bit because obviously quantum is a buzzword. You see quantum overly used in so many different things, but let me be a little bit precise by what it means. So quantum technologies essentially are technologies, devices that harness the fundamental properties of the structures that they're built from. So we're talking about basically utilizing the basic properties, the building blocks, the atoms, the electrons, the photons in the structures to create devices that do things that classical structures, classical devices, the mobile phones and computers that we're using today can't. So we're looking for performance metrics that are simply not possible with classical devices. And let me give you some examples of some areas that we're working in. Now, I have to caveat this slide by saying the current position of technology development of quantum technologies is akin to where we were with digital technologies maybe 50 years ago. And if you wind the clock back 50 years and you look at science fiction, it's fair to say that most science fiction didn't predict where we'd get to today with digital technologies. So it's difficult to look too far into the future with any level of confidence. But there are certain areas that we know quantum technologies will deliver some very exciting things in the future, or currently are delivering some very exciting things. And I'll talk to you a little bit about these. So the first are quantum computers, and you've probably heard about these in the news a lot at the moment. So a quantum computer is basically a device that can perform computation, as the name suggests, that classical computers simply can't. So there are certain tasks, there are certain computational tasks that we know a classical computer, no matter how big you make it, will never be able to tackle. And some of these are extremely exciting, some of these problems that can be solved by quantum computers. A really good example and an early example will probably be in the field of drug discovery and computational chemistry. So understanding or designing a particular molecule for a specific job. So if you take a molecule, you take a collection of atoms, you might have hundreds or thousands of atoms in it, and you want to rearrange those atoms to basically perform a specific job, to cure a specific disease. It is basically very, very, very difficult for a classical computer to do this, and we believe that a quantum computer will be able to do that very efficiently. So we have a very exciting future ahead for quantum computers. Next is the field of quantum security devices. We obviously live in this digital world. We rely on so many technologies and the information security around those, but actually it turns out that information security is something that we're really lacking with a lot of these devices. And quantum physics, quantum technologies can do better. We can have provably secure devices. We can find solutions to problems such as counterfeiting and authentication and proof of provenance. And this is an area that I'm incredibly passionate about. Next is the area of quantum sensing. Our digital lives are reliant on sensors. If you take something like your mobile phone, for example, there are probably dozens of sensors in a modern mobile phone. They can sense everything from magnetic fields to acceleration, temperature, various different light sensors, CCDs, cameras. And of course, if we can make these sensors better, then we can deliver new performances. So that's a very exciting area. And the last area is probably the one that's the least accessible. That's the area of metrology. Metrology is the art of measuring things. So measuring, for example, time or electric fields, things like this. But measurements are incredibly important for a number of areas. But one that's really important is things like GPS. So you need to be able to measure time very, very accurately to be able to infer a precise location from something like GPS. And if we could, for example, put an atomic clock in everybody's mobile phones, then they would be able to locate themselves much more accurately through GPS, which could obviously derive new applications. So what are we doing here in Lancashire? Well, at Lancaster University, we founded a Quantum Technology Centre about 8 years ago now. This is a very exciting facility. It brings together people from a whole host of departments because quantum technology isn't just about physics or the definition of quantum, it's about actually making real-world products. And so it's really important that we also have engineers, chemists, material scientists, computer scientists, and really some world-class facilities for creating these structures and measuring them. And of course, we have open days at the university, so if you'd like to come and see these facilities, you're more than welcome. You're invited, and really proud of the facilities that we've built up in Lancashire. I want to, oops, sorry, I went forward one too many slides. I want to just give you a quick idea of some of the projects that we're actually delivering at the moment in the Quantum Technology Centre in Lancaster, and some of the exciting work that's going on. I already mentioned the atomic clock that can fit in your smartphone. This is work that's been led by Edward Laird, Lancaster, which is based on basically a C60 molecule, so a football-shaped molecule of carbon atoms trapping a nitrogen atom, which may be in your mobile phone in the near future. We're developing a new type of memory, which has the advantages of classical RAM and flash memory, so the memory that's in your SSDs in your computers. And this may change the architecture of computers in the future, allowing them to have better performance than current devices. My own personal interest is in the field of quantum security, and we're developing devices for Internet Things networks. So, billions and billions of small electronic devices. How can we make them more secure without making them too complicated or too expensive? And we have some really neat solutions through my spin-out company, Quantum Base. We have some very exciting key enabling technologies for quantum computers. So we're developing the electronic systems that will go in quantum computers and some of the low temperature platforms. So most quantum computers need to operate at very low temperatures. And we actually, you probably don't need me to tell you that Lancashire is often one of the wettest places on the planet. But you're probably surprised to find that it's also one of the coldest, or it has one of the coldest. We actually have several points in the recent past, the world record for the lowest electron temperature in devices, and this provides an excellent platform for developing quantum computing and elements for quantum computers. And then just one final example, which is also incredibly important. Modern digital devices and processors are incredibly wasteful when it comes to energy. So a lot of their performance requires the generation of heat. If you watch a video, play a computer game on your mobile phone, you'll see the device heats up. We're developing materials which can basically utilize the quantum properties of molecules of materials to efficiently reuse that heat, so to turn it back into electricity and to recover some of the energy which would otherwise be wasted. So just a handful of kind of exciting technologies that we're developing at the QTC in Lancaster. And then finally, I just thought I'd give you an avenue to find out a little bit more about what we're doing. We do an awful lot of outreach work. We travel around the country in various different places, doing all sorts of exhibits. The video that's playing at the moment is actually from an exhibit that was in the Barbican Centre in London recently. We're actually bringing this to Light Up Lancaster this year, which will be in the first week of November. So please, if you'd like to talk to us and see a little bit about what we're doing, and this is an example of a quantum random number generator, which is generating these digital patterns you can see, and why this particular product, this particular technology is really useful. And we've also produced a lot of videos which you can find on YouTube, and there's a couple of examples here. Thank you ever so much for your time, and I'll hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Rob. That was really interesting and insightful. Could I invite Marcello, Professor Marcello Trevatti, to come and present some of his research and activities?
Thank you for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm not sure whether my talk will be as exciting as the previous one, because my research interest and my expertise mainly focuses on mathematics. So let me just give you a brief introduction. So I'm a professor in computer science at Yale University. My main interests are research interests around data science, artificial intelligence, and I've been working with a variety of partners and lots of projects, European projects and related to innovation and KTPs, and working with local as well as local companies. So let me just go back a few years, and so my background. So I was trained as a pure mathematician. So what you can see, it's a pretty picture. So it's the aim was really to understand how mathematical entities, specific mathematical entities, behave in the long term. And then I took a break from academia, and I worked for IBM Research. Whilst I was there, I started working on mathematical modeling, but also how we can use mathematics and statistics to understand information, and how we can extract actionable information from highly unstructured data sets, for example, text or even images. And ultimately, the aim was really to create systems that we can actually use to reason in an automated way. So we try to help computers to make decisions. And so when then I moved back to academia, I continued this trend. And so I'm particularly interested, and also with my team, in the mathematical formulation of artificial intelligence. So the aim is really to try to mimic our brain. So we function in this world, we are continuously bombarded by stimuli, but we still function, and we can make decisions, we can make predictions. Sometimes they're not particularly accurate, but most of the times we function perfectly well. So can we do that in an automated system? Can we try to make computers do the same? And that is really the aim of what we try to do. So there's mathematical modeling for decision-making processes, but also this idea of collective behavior. Data is highly unstructured. As we know, we can gather data on a regular basis, on a daily basis, but every single item, data item, behaves sometimes in a collective way, and this collectivity can provide very useful insights into the behavior of data, the information related to data. And although it's still quite theoretical, but we have seen important applications in data analytics and visualization, complex systems, disruptive technologies, and more importantly, Industry 4.0. Now, on this, my last slides is really, you just see some pictures, hopefully some pretty pictures. So what we see here, we see networks. So on the left-hand side is what we are all acquainted with, is social networks. And social networks are highly connected systems where all the little dots represent people, and based on the connections that these people have, then we can actually understand the behavior at microscopic level, so one-to-one interactions, but also a more general level, so how they exhibit a sort of collective intelligence. But then the same can be applied to more, to diverse settings. So at the bottom you see a transportation network. Although on one side we are talking about people, we are talking about social networks, and then here we are talking about objects, we are talking about transportation items, lorries, aeroplanes, etc. And so, although they are apparently they are different, but they behave in a very similar way. And so all these highly connected scenarios, these highly connected environments behave in a similar way. And strangely enough, we are not very much different from ants, for example. So the idea of ant colonies and how swarms, so we can talk about birds, we can talk about bees, and we all have properties that are common. And why then do we need really to understand these properties? And the reason is we can predict future behaviors. If we're talking about human dynamics, we can predict how people might react based on specific scenarios, but also we can predict how a transportation network will react based on specific events. And then the last graph is a Bayesian network. So what is it? Bayesian networks are similar to networks, but they are used to make predictions, to understand how objects are linked. So when I walk around, and I want to cross the road, I look around, and if I see a car, then at that moment, I will make a decision whether to cross at that time or just wait. And there are a variety of parameters I need to understand, so that I need to assess the speed of the car, the distance, and so based on all these interconnections, then I will make a decision. And that is precisely what we are trying to do. Based on very highly interconnected and complex networks, we can then extract, in a way, more structured networks that can help to automate the reasoning system. And we have seen, and we have been working with businesses, with international businesses, local businesses, and national businesses, as well as with other research entities. We have seen applications in a variety of contexts, from management, from customer management, so how to understand how customers might behave based on the introduction of a new product, for example, or to the health sector, on how to specific events might impact the, for example, the A&E attendance of a specific hospital. So all these interconnections, which I think are incredibly exciting. So if you want to know more, please do let me know, and you can find my website on the Edge Hill University if you just go to the Computer Science Department webpage. Alternatively, you're very welcome to send me an email, and that's my email address. Thank you.
Again, another great presentation with some real insight into what we think is going to happen in the future. And last but not least, I'd like to invite Professor Subrayal from the University of Central Lancashire.
So I'm going to talk to you about some of the work that I do and work that's been happening in the field of molecularly imprinted polymers. My name is Professor Subrayal Reddy, and I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of Central Lancashire. And so I specialise in biomaterials and analytical sciences. And one of the things that I've been interested in is developing polymers and materials, synthetic receptors, which can mimic antibody function. And so just to give you a brief overview on what I mean by molecular imprinting and molecular imprinted polymers, here we have a target molecule in the brown blob there in the middle, and we've got these little pink dots which are functional monomers. These are monomer molecules, and what we do is we allow an interaction to happen between our target that we're interested in imprinting and the functional monomers. So these are non-covalent interactions which are going on, like hydrogen bonding interactions, electrostatic and van der Waals interactions. So we have a self-assembly of these monomers around our target, and then we allow that to polymerize in the presence of a cross-linker. And what we do is we actually physically entrap our target, but then we can actually release that target, and what we're left with is a cavity, and that cavity has sort of affinity for the rebinding of our target. Okay, so that target molecule is imprinted effectively in that polymer. So I see this as a bit of child's play as well. This is where my children have been playing with Play-Doh, and what they're doing is they're sort of putting an imprint into the Play-Doh, and they take the shape out, and what's left is the cavity, and that cavity will only fit that particular shape that it was imprinted with. So that's where again the selectivity and the affinity for our target molecule. So we can do this on the nanoscale. We're looking at polymers here, and so we're looking at a range of different monomer molecules that we can use. And so there's been a lot of research gone on into understanding that self-assembly process of these target monomers around our molecule of interest. And there's also dynamic simulations that can be done, that we've done as well, where we can look at the monomer target interactions to get the best fit, if you like, between the monomers and the target. And so when the polymer is produced, we do get a good fit for our particular target. So why are we actually interested in this? We're actually trying to make antibody mimics. So antibodies are the body's natural defense against infection. They're very, very, very sort of adept and have evolved over time to be able to do this very well. But there are disadvantages when it comes to looking at these natural biological receptors, in that they have low stability when they're outside the body. They can be expensive to produce. They do have poor performance in non-aqueous media. And so it might be difficult to actually use them in a diagnostic setting, which is one of the areas that I'm interested in. What I'm thinking is, in terms of the molecular imprinted polymers, because they have that receptor capability, the same binding affinity as the biological analog of it, the antibody, we can actually use these polymers outside the body, and they're very highly stable under different pH conditions and pressure and temperature. They're very inexpensive to prepare, actually, so we can actually prepare these for a fraction of a penny. And there is the possibility of integrating these MIPs, these polymers, these molecularly imprinted polymers, onto sensor devices. So just quickly going back onto the antibody approach, it is a very, very sophisticated approach. As I mentioned, it's had millions of years, if you like, to evolve and be able to do exactly its job the way it needs to be done. And so it is the first defense in the body against infection. But in some cases, antibodies aren't produced as quickly or at all when there's an infection. And in those cases, there have been different types of therapies which have been developed based on in vitro production of these antibodies, and then injection of the antibodies into the body as drugs to fight infection, whether it be a viral infection or a cancer cell or a cancer in the body. The antibodies have also been actually used in a variety of diagnostic settings, and you'll be aware of the lateral flow tests, which has been rolled out for COVID-19, but it's also been used as a pregnancy test kit as well. So antibodies are in those test kits. They're also used in laboratory-based tests as well as biosensors. So what are we trying to do with our molecular imprinted polymer, our MIP approach? So our synthetic receptor approach, what we're trying to do is actually not necessarily replace antibodies, that's going to be a hard sell, but for them to work alongside where antibodies either fail or antibodies can't be produced quick enough. And with our system, with our molecular imprinted system, the fact that we can actually produce these MIPs, these synthetic receptors within hours, and they are actually very cheap to produce. We can actually have a range of analytes that we can imprint, going from the small molecule end, like drugs and pesticides, all the way up through amino acids, peptides, proteins, glycans, and also in terms of bacteria. So we've got a bit of light at the back there, aren't we? That's going to show me as a silhouette now, isn't it? Anyway, so what we've got here is the fact that we've got these different MIPs that can be produced, so we can actually target small molecules, and this has been done in terms of bioseparation and chromatography. And so you can actually go to a chemical company and produce and buy actually these MIPs as solid phase extraction cartridges. They've actually been used in terms of developing drug leads in our own laboratory. We've actually used our molecular imprinted polymers as nucleants for protein crystallization. And in some cases, proteins crystallization is a very difficult task. But if you can crystallize a protein, you can get the X-ray diffraction structure of it. You can actually develop drugs based on that. And we've actually used our MIP successfully as cheap, alternative, and fast nucleants for protein crystallization for drug development. The MIPs are also being used in sensors and biosensors, so they can easily be adapted onto a sensor surface, like an electrochemical sensor surface, or a quartz crystal microbalance, or an optical sensor. So we can actually put these down as microparticle MIPs, nanoparticle MIPs, or thin film MIPs onto a sensor surface. And the MIPs are also being used, once they've been fluorescently tagged, they can be actually used in medical imaging as well, in terms of imaging cells and tissues. So just to have an idea of where we think we're going with this, as I mentioned, we're not trying to replace antibodies, but to work alongside them so they can actually sort of enhance the antibody approach, but also there might be the opportunity for actually to use MIPs in therapeutics. So we've actually demonstrated that we can use our MIPs to neutralize virus and virus infection, and that's opening up interesting possibilities in terms of using MIPs for therapeutics. And this is just a quick slide showing what by inspiration we can get from this is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, how it interacts with the ACE2 receptor on cells. Effectively, that's what we're doing with our molecular imprinted polymers, in that we're designing a cavity which is specific for the binding of our target. So it could be the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and it's actually acting as a receptor. And once we've actually grabbed it there, can we neutralize it? And I think this is where the technology is going in terms of biological applications. And finally, I'd just like to quickly just thank some of my guys who have worked on this, and my MIP team members, but also my international collaborators and my funders. And if you're interested in this more, yes, I am from the University of Central Lancashire, so please do look me up. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sub. That was really interesting. Gentlemen, could I ask you to come and join me at the front again? And we have some questions for you, which hopefully you'll be able to answer for us. So one of the questions we have is, using your access to data and research, have you ever thought, why has nobody done this yet? And what was it? So is there anything in your research where you thought, this is so simple, why isn't it not done before?
Yeah, maybe I can start. So one of the, I guess, key, so I'm an author on 15 patents now, something like this. And one of my best inventions, I think, is an anti-counterfeiting technology that's based on imperfections at the atomic scale. So basically, we take warts in quantum materials and we use them as a fingerprint to uniquely identify a device that's been labeled with them. And we had this eureka moment where we said, well, we can turn this problem of nanotechnology on its head and we can use it in anti-counterfeiting. And that was definitely a eureka moment where I said, why has this never been done before? Because we've been fighting, this problem in the field of nanotechnology for 20 years, and actually to say, well, actually that's good for something. So yeah, if you've got a really big problem, I definitely recommend thinking, well, how can I use this? What can I use that for? What could that be useful for?
Interesting. Marcello?
Yeah, I mean, it's on several occasions I've come across problems, and sometimes simple problems that can be described using very few words, and they tend to be incredibly complicated. And for example, when we talk about the brain, how we can mimic some processes that can be in the brain so that they can be automated. That is incredible. It should have been done by now, because a lot of people are working on it. Neuroscientists, mathematicians, physicists, but we're still quite way off, I would say. But we are getting there.
You'll get there in the end.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah.
Sub.
So when I started working in this area about 10 years ago, I started talking to biologists. And I said this could be a really interesting way of actually sort of making MIPS as receptors for biological molecules. And from a biological point of view, it was a case of, that's not going to work. Why would that work? That was the perspective. So then when we started doing the work and we actually did the research and we were able to imprint for these large biologicals, they just thought it's just too big. You're not going to be able to, get the affinities that you want. But then we were getting the data, generating the data, and that's kind of increased the confidence in the biological community. And we've been doing a lot more in terms of the virus neutralization sort of research as well.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Question number 2. Communication has been a topic that has come up lots of times today. Do you think we can work effectively across the county to take your wonderful research and find opportunities across different sectors? And I'll just add to that. One of the things I've noticed throughout all of the conversations today is there is a real sense of enthusiasm from all of the speakers, whether you're based in a university or based in a company. And the other thing is there's a real, people want to collaborate and want to engage with each other. So, is that something that you think, Lancashire has? There's a real sort of communal opportunity there to come together and start to develop solutions to some of these problems that you've identified.
Yeah, maybe if I can start again. I think collaboration is incredibly important, and we do collaborate throughout the region. My kind of research is heavily dependent on resources. You saw some of the resources that we have in the Quantum Technology Centre in Lancaster, but it's certainly not all-encompassing. The equipment that we use is incredibly expensive, so it's really important to collaborate with other universities that are using pieces of equipment for alternative purposes. And then also to get ideas from other innovators and maybe again going back to the example of the anti-counterfeiting technology. Every single time I talk to somebody about it, they say, "Well, can't use it here and can't use it there." We're working in the pharmaceutical space to prevent people dying when they take counterfeit medication that doesn't have active ingredients in, for example. But then equally with designer handbag manufacturers who have a completely different problem, but it's in the same space. So yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Marcello?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, and particularly passionate about working with businesses. And in this county, there is a large number of SMEs, for example. And so it's quite exciting to work with them and trying to identify problems. In many cases, these problems are incredibly interesting also from an academic point of view. And so it's not just about collaborating at academic level, but business level as well. And for me, as you know, from my presentations, I tend to work with a lot of mathematical gibberish. And for me, it's incredibly exciting to see that you can actually see something tangible. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, collaboration is key, but getting buy-in as well from sort of, for example, the SMEs that we've talked about, but also big drug pharma industry. Just if you look at the market for some of the things I was talking about in terms of sort of the immunotherapies, that's a $1 billion industry, and we to tap into that with our synthetic receptors, even if it's at 1%, 2% level, I think it would be fantastic. So I think it's just getting them on board and getting them sort of warmed up to the idea, just like I warmed up the biologists a few years back.
Right. Okay. How do you think? I'm gonna reframe this slightly, because the question is, how do you think being in Lancashire will help your future research, and what challenges do you think the county has? I'm going to slightly change that and say, being in Lancashire, what opportunities do you think it will bring to your research? Now, it could be, you know, for example, if you were based down south, is it going to be a lot more expensive to do your research? You know, is there any benefits to being in Lancashire doing what you do?
Yeah, so I mean, you've highlighted a very good example. So, you know, I showed you a picture of a part of the Quantum Technology Centre that was built 4 years ago. It's a new lab called ISOLab. It's bells and whistles. We can do measurements in there that nobody else can do on the planet. And we built the whole building for £2 million, which is a lot of money, but it's very, very cheap for the kind of facilities. So certainly space, you know, we benefit from here in the Northwest. But I started at Lancaster, or I started my main career at Lancaster with a fellowship from the Royal Society that I could take to any university I like in the country. And I came to Lancaster because it's a phenomenal institution. I mean, it has this kind of melting pot of brilliant people, and it has a very friendly atmosphere. So I think there's something in the culture in the Northwest where people have a smile on their face, they like to work with each other. And I came from Cambridge, and in Cambridge, you know, it's a quick anecdote, but in the physics department, there were 5 different groups, each supported by different, Japanese corporations, and nobody could talk to anybody else, nobody would work with anybody else. And it was fierce, and it drove a different kind of innovation, but it wasn't nice. And I really like the French.
So you feel a lot freer now to do what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, Marcello?
Yeah, I agree. And also talking about working with SMEs, there are loads of SMEs that are not afraid of talking to us and suggesting problems, trying to address specific issues they face. And so there's this openness that I think is essential for us, I would say.
Okay, so
Yeah, I think it's the economics of it, just to be based in the Northwest in Lancashire. That kind of opens up opportunities in terms of setting up our own spin out, for example. But in terms of connecting with the rest of the world, that's going to happen regardless. But to make Lancashire a hub would be fantastic.
Okay. I mean, it's great to see that in all of your research that we've seen today, you've got one eye on the future, you know, and that's great stuff. And you're thinking, Rob, you made the point that, you know, you are now where IT was 50 years ago, for example. So it's great that you've got that sort of long-term lens. But it's also great that you're thinking about today, and you're thinking about some of the solutions that your research could bring today. If I was to ask you each of you one question, which is, at the end of your career, what would you want to be known for?
Do I have to go first?
If there was a Nobel Prize to be given to you today, what would it be for? What would you want it to be for?
I mean, I'm not here because I'm looking for personal recognition. I realize this might be dodging the question a little bit, but I love the fact that I'm championing quantum technologies, that I represent, 50 to 100 people in the QTC at Lancaster. And I could have chosen to talk to you today about just the things that I'm doing personally, but I really like the idea of talking to you about the field, because it's the field for me that's really exciting, and that revolution. So, I mean, I'd like to be remembered as the champion of quantum technology who helped to, but I don't really want to pick a single thing or an invention or a Nobel Prize. That I'd quite, if somebody's listening and they're filling in their Nobel form for next year, that I wouldn't mind it.
Okay. Well, there's a nice prize that comes with a Nobel Prize, isn't there? Marcello?
Oh, well, it's a difficult question. And I understand. I mean, it's not just, again, it's not just about personal recognition, because at the end of the day, it's a collaboration. So there are researchers all over the world working on different areas. But I am incredibly passionate about artificial intelligence and mathematical modeling, and how we can automate some brain processes to help people. And so, yeah, that would be, I'd like to be remembered for that. possible.
Yeah, I'll concur. I'm not here for personal recognition. It's like something I think we all agree we're working in areas we're really passionate about, and we want to see it succeed and see these products come out and be used because we can see the benefits in it. I think that's the important thing.
Okay. When you present your research, I mean, I understood some of it, not all of it, I have to say. Do you find it difficult when you're trying to get people interested in what you do, and do you have to sort of think about how you present that? Because you guys are talking up here, but we're me in terms of business type activities, I'm thinking, so what can I do with that? And is that something that you give a lot of thought to in terms of how you present what you're doing?
Yeah. So personally, I would say my ability to communicate has never been fantastic. So I don't think I'm a natural communicator, and it's certainly something that I'm consciously aware of as being incredibly important. So I think if you can't explain your ideas to a general audience, what good are you? And I guess to that extent, I'm a keen advocate for public engagement, and it's something that we do an awful lot of. So we've done, for example, the Summer Science Exhibition in London for the last 4 years in a row, and it's incredibly challenging having 12,000 people come up to you and talk to you about what you're doing. But it really helps to refine your pitch and your patter, and so I think the best way to do something, the best way to get good at doing something is to practice a lot. And so yes, it's something that I actively seek out, even though I don't necessarily enjoy it.
Okay. Yeah. It's quite difficult to put yourself out there, isn't it?
It is.
Marcello?
Yeah, and especially when you deal with mathematics, when people hear the word mathematics, it's just, but it's, and I'm also very passionate about it. So one of the issues then I could talk for hours about. So usually what I tend to do, what I learned to do is to listen. First of all, is ask why, what they're trying to solve, what they're interested in, and then from there I'll try to explain what I do and now how it fits with what they are trying to do or what they are interested in.
So,
yeah, in my presentation, I showed a picture of my children playing with Play-Doh. I think that kind of like sort of, for me, it kind of like sort of was the nice, simple image of what we're doing. But in terms of communication, I've done stand-up comedy, science comedy, and that's been a great medium to be able to get your science out, embedding it into a lot of jokes. You get a laugh. I'm not a professional comedian, but did things like Bright Club, and I did Edinburgh Fringe as well.
Oh right.
But it was the fringe bit of the fringe bit, as it like. So
the off-Broadway.
Yeah. So communicating science basically through comedy.
Okay. And we might have some young research colleagues from outside of Lancashire at the moment. What advice would you give them just starting off their career?
Shall I start?
Yeah, please.
Well, I think starting off your research, you're enthusiastic when you start with, but you've got to maintain that enthusiasm, and there are going to be knockbacks. That's what research is about. It's not always going to work first time, and there's going to be a lot of repeats, and I'm trying to understand the system. As soon as you've understood the system, everything starts suddenly working, and you have to have the resilience to stick with it. It's the important thing, just to stick with it and keep, there's going to be times when you're anxious about things, and the cure to anxiety is action. Just get on with it.
Okay, it's a good piece of advice.
Yeah, perseverance. I think it's the key, and it's probably one of the most difficult things to achieve. But it's if you're interested in research, I think perseverance is one of the most important things to have.
Maybe a bit controversial. I might disagree with a point slightly, but maybe say something else first. So I think passion is incredibly important. I think if you're not passionate about what you're working on, if you don't have a smile on your face while you're working on it, then you're missing a trick, especially when you're doing science or research. So find something that you're really passionate about. And if you're working in a modern university, you're probably surrounded by a sweet shop of resources that you can tap into and find a way to do that. I think that's incredibly important. perseverance is important, but it's also important to recognize when something's not working and to pivot. And balancing those things is difficult. And for me, the balance was always multitasking, always making sure that I'm working on more than one project at once, so that if something isn't working and not delivering, my career is still ticking over. I'm still producing papers. I'm still doing something interesting. And you never know when the right point to give up on something is, because I still have projects which have not succeeded, and I probably put too much time into. So it's a very difficult balance, I think, knowing when to give up on something. Yeah.
Okay. And another question is, in terms of Lancashire as a place to do business, do you think, from a research perspective, is Lancashire open to business? Open for business?
Yeah, maybe I can start. I mean, I have a company which is Lancashire based, and we've been able to leverage an awful lot of support because of the amazing county that we live in. So ERDF funding, resources through the university, things like impact acceleration accounts. Having thriving universities and the resources that we have, I think it's brilliant. So yeah, absolutely.
Marcello?
Yeah, I agree. So we have I have a similar experience. So as I mentioned earlier, there's also this openness that people really want to make a difference, and there are a lot of businesses that really want to improve, and they want to make it. They want to grow, and they want to pursue innovation.
I agree with all of them. Yeah, I think it is open for business, and that there are opportunities that we can take forward. And I think we've heard examples of where this has actually happened. It's a spin-out company that you've got, isn't it, Rob?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We have no more questions. So I'd like to thank you for your time today and giving some real insight into the work that you're doing. I think from today, as I said before, throughout today, what we've seen is a willingness to collaborate. There is an infrastructure and an expertise in Lancashire, which, if you're not familiar with, Lancashire is a great place to do business. We have world-leading research academics in our universities. We have fantastic small businesses, large businesses. The opportunity is there. And if you're not engaging with a university at the moment, we have 3 examples of academics who are more than happy to engage with you as a business. So thank you for coming on today.